And welcome back, students. Today we're starting programming with arrays. Let's start off by discussing partially filled arrays. So getting started. Often the exact size needed for an array is not known when a program is written, or the size may vary from one run of the program to another. Good example of this, for example, you might think about, just to kind of get you started with it, is when we have a user input the size of the array. That we might be using the same array name, but one time it might be array size 5, next time it might be array size 10. Now, one common and easy way to handle this situation is to declare the array to be of the largest size the program could possibly need. So, for example, if you know that the largest possible size, let's say, is 100, then you can find it to be that big. The program then is free to use as much or as little of the array as needed. So, partially filled arrays require some care. The program has to keep track of how much the array is used and must not reference any index variable that has not been getting a meaningful value. In other words, if it's null. Now, the program golf scores illustrates this point, so I'm just going to go over to golf scores here. And in here you can see here is our sample program. So we have a static final int called max number of scores is 10. And in here we have our main method, which simply just calls this array right here. This is new double max number of scores. So we have that defined as 10. Int number used is 0. And then down here we have this number used is equal to fill array score. Right? Fill array is this method right here that we have defined. So it's like a secondary one. So public static int fill array double A. It's just another print line, enter up to a.length, the plus non-negative numbers. This is another print line, mark the end of the list with a negative number. So in here, it's going to get, scanner keyboard, new system, scanner system in, double next, index is 0, next keyboard.next double. And then we run this loop here. This is while next is greater than or equal to 0 and index is less than a.length. We're going to take the array index, set it equal to next, and we're going to then increment index, and then we'll have next be equal to keyboard.next double. Then you'll notice if we put in a negative number, that's going to break it out of this loop here because next will be not greater than or equal to 0. So then down here we have this if. It says if next is greater than or equal to 0. This is not a print line, could only read in a.length input values. So then of course you have this compute average down here, which is for the second half of this function here. So you have score, it's number used. So let's go back to notes. So what this program does is it basically reads any list of golf scores and shows how much each score differs from the average. This program will work for lists as short as 1 score, as long as 10 scores, and any length in between. All right, you'll notice that if you put a score length of 0, it's not going to be able to work. All right, and if I run this here, you can see this program reads in golf scores and shows how much different from the average. Enter golf scores, enter up 10 negative numbers, mark the end of the list with a negative number. So let's just say I put in 50, 62, 65, and let's do negative 1, because that's a negative number, so then list. Hit enter, and it'll give me the average of the scores is 59, and it says the scores are 50.0 differs from the average by negative 9, 62.0 differs from the average by 3.0, and 65 differs from the average by 6.0. The scores are stored in the array score, which has 10 index variables, but the program only uses as much of the array as it needs. The variable number used keeps track of how many elements are stored in the array, and the elements, that is the scores, are stored in positions score 0 through score number used minus 1. All right, which of course you can see demonstrated here because we put in 1, 2, 3 scores, and so that array technically only has 3 values in it. In fact, if I were to output this array, you would find out that these would be the only 3 values actually in the array. Now the details are very similar to what they'd be if number used were scored at length and the entire array were used. You'll note that the variable number used usually must be an argument to any method that manipulates the partially filled array. For example, the methods show difference compute average use the argument number used to ensure that only the meaningful array indices are used. So if we look back here, for example, here's compute average right here. Here, show difference. So you'll notice in their parameter here is number used. Right? That's how we help ensure that we're using the proper array. Right? Now, let's talk about a class for partially filled arrays. So if you're going to use an array in some disciplined way, such as using the array as a partially filled array, then it's often best to create a class that has the array as an instance variable and have the constructors and methods of the class provide the needed operations as methods. The partially filled array class is an array of doubles. Golf Scores 2 is the Golf Scores class rewritten now with this new class. However, this does result in occasionally recomputing a value several times. So let me just pop over here quick. So here's partially filled array, and you can see in here it has some different elements here. So here's partially filled array. So here's our constructor methods. Now here is a void add double, double get element, reset element, delete last, delete, empty, full, get capacity, number of elements. And you'll see here in this one, we still have the same methods. However, now we're using this class here. All right, now quick example of how this stuff gets redundant. Method compute average contains the following expression 3 times. A dot get number of elements. So if we look at compute average in Golf Scores 2, we have A dot get number of elements here. We have A dot get number of elements here. And we also see it here as well. Because the partially filled array is not changed in this method, each of these will technically return the same value. Now, some programs advocate computing this value once and only saving the value in a variable. Now, these programs would rather use following for the definition of compute average rather than what we use in Golf Scores. The variable number of elements in A is used to save value, so it need not be recomputed. So here's our class for partially filled arrays. And here we have public static double compute average partially filled array A, double total equals A, double number of elements in A equals A dot get number of elements, for index equals 0, index is less than number of elements in A, index plus plus, total equals total plus A dot get elements index. If number of elements in A is greater than 0, return the total divided by number of elements in A. Else, print out error trying to average 0 numbers. System out applying compute average return 0, return 0. So in here, that's saying this is an alternative approach to using this. And now the thing you'll note that this is likely to produce a noticeable difference in the efficiency of the program Golf Scores 2. But if the number of elements in the partially filled array were large so that the for loop we execute many times, it might make a difference in a situation where efficiency is critical. Now here's a quick tip for you. Accessor methods need not simply return instance variables. Again, note that in the class partially filled array, there is no accessor method that returns a copy of the entire instance variable A. All right, there's no gets in here. Not a single get method exists in partially filled array. The reason that this was not done is that when the class is used as intended, a user of the class partially filled array would have no need for the entire array A. This is an implementation detail. I remember we're looking at just a partial fill, not a full fill, and so that's why we don't need to return all of A. The other methods to start with get allow a program using the class to obtain the data that he or she needs. And that's going to wrap it up, folks. Until next time.